Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I hope you are having a wonderful week. It is almost the end of February. Tomorrow is the last day of February, and then we're into March. I hope wherever you are, the weather is getting better. It is finally raining a little bit where I am. It doesn't rain a lot in Northern California these days, more than Southern California, but we still could use more rain than we've gotten. So it hailed here yesterday, which was really, really strange. It was almost like snow, but of course, not really. So I hope you're getting a little bit of spring wherever you are. And that is enough about the weather. That concludes my weather report for this episode, I promise. Instead, I would much rather talk about books and authors, and I'm excited to once again bring you an author interview. Today, I am speaking with author Donalyn Maurer about her currently 6-book series, The McGinty's of San Antonio. I'll give you the blurb from the first book, as I normally do. I don't like to give too much away from other books, but I will read you that description of the first book. This is the story of J.C. McGinty. While finding herself in a slump a year after her grandpa's death, she meets Rocky Jennings and believes he might be the person to help bring her back to life after her loss. But as soon as she begins to hope and slowly wake from the nightmare of grandpa's death, she wakes to another nightmare. Rocky is not at all who he appears to be. She suddenly finds herself fighting not only for her own life, but for the life of her family and true love as well. JC has courage and determination, but will it be enough to end the danger, or will she have to end it all by allowing Rocky to end her? So that is the description of the first of the books in the McGinty's of San Antonio series, and that book is called Falling into Blue. I clearly did not read the book description before I read this book. I had been speaking with Donalyn about having her on the podcast, and she sent me the book, and I jumped into it, and I'm thinking, oh, this is just kind of a lighthearted romance, and, you know, it takes place in Texas, and I used to live in Texas for a few years, so I was having some Texas nostalgia about bluebonnets and, you know, just a few things about Texas, and then wham, it went from a lighthearted romance to a little bit more of a thriller, actually. And I will tell you that, as a trigger warning, this book does deal with some domestic violence and rape. So if those are sensitive subjects, you may want to steer clear from this series, just as the trigger warning. But it's an interesting story because, and Donalyn will talk about this a little bit more, she drew from some of her own experiences to write this book. And so for her, it was a process. It was a healing process for her to tell this story. I appreciated this story for JC's courage and the support that she has from her family. Her family is large and kind of a mixed, blended family. There's lots of aunts and uncles, and it takes a little bit to actually kind of figure out who is who. So that's the first novel in the series, and it is, you know, a bit of a heavy topic, but it is surrounded by this loving family and the relationships that are in there. So that really helps to drive the story and to really take a terrible subject, but surround it with this loving family, thankfully. So that's the first one, Falling into Blue. The second one, Love is Forever Blue, is also about JC and Max, or Blue as he is known. JC and Max are in the first novel, and they are the main characters in the second novel as well. The third novel takes a different direction, and it is focused on JC's younger sister, Abigail. So after the first two, we start to go to some different characters. And then the sixth book, which is the last one that is currently out, goes back to JC and Max a little bit, because it is Forever and a Day, and it's JC and Max's wedding. So there are more books to come about the various characters in the family. So you really get to know this family very, very well. And as the books go on, you get to know some of the secondary characters better, the parts of the family, and then other people that are brought in. And it's a very interesting series in terms of family relationships and family dynamics. And I'm going to let Donalyn talk more about it, because I'm starting to ramble. So let's just turn to that interview, and we will let Donalyn speak about her own books. So here is that interview with author Donalyn Maurer, author of the McGinty's of San Antonio series. Hi, Donalyn. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. So we are here to talk about your series, The McGinty's of San Antonio. And before we do that, before we get to the books, I would love for my listeners to get to know you a little bit. So if you could share whatever you're comfortable sharing, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I'm actually pretty boring. I love to sit home and read when I'm not writing. I've been married for 33 years, and we have 3 kids, 3 grandkids. I enjoy spending time with them, and that's pretty much my life when I'm not writing is the family.
Okay. And you are originally from San Antonio, is that correct?
I am originally born and raised in San Antonio, military wife, and somehow we managed to stay in San Antonio all but maybe 7 years of a 31-year career.
Oh, wow.
We were able to stay. Yeah, it's really unusual, but we were able to stay in the area, and got to see all my kids, went to the same, town, graduated the same area. Well, my youngest graduated at Mount Vernon in Virginia. But it was it was really different. Well, we're Air Force. So, Army's different, Marines are different, and everybody's different. But Air Force, we're the ones that can kind of stay situated for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. So the series is set in San Antonio. Can you tell us a little bit about the series?
Well, the series was born pretty much, my husband was tired of me borrowing his debit card every time I turned around to buy Kristen Ashley books. So he was like, write your own book. And I was like, well, I kind of had an idea, like I had my story in my head, but I didn't think it was really, one people would want to read. And he said, well, just do it. So I kind of turned my attention from reading to writing. And I worked on this, and I submitted it to a publisher, and they picked it up. It's pretty much the structure of the family I grew up in, 6 kids. 4 of us were raised by my grandparents. I knew both my parents. They were awesome, but we were raised by my grandparents. And we were kind of fun growing up. We hung out at the lake, and we had this real good time. But then things got serious for me as I got older. And when you get into falling into blue, you get a taste of what happened in my life. But you also get a taste of the structure of my family in that book too.
Okay, so that answers some of my questions of, are there autobiographical elements in the story? Obviously, it's based on your family. There's some heavy subject matter in this series, and I don't want to give too much away, but it starts out as feeling like a very kind of lighthearted romance, and then quickly takes a bit of a darker turn. Can you talk a little bit about that? We don't want to give too much away, but
I think I wrote it that way because that's how it happened in real life. It was just, kind of going along, enjoying it, and then boom. So I wanted to keep as much of reality, even though people would go, that just doesn't sound like reality. It actually was reality. And so, I know there was some comments that, when the book came out, like, why didn't this character do this or why didn't that one do that? And it's just until you're in a situation like I was or JC was, you just don't know what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to jump in on that note for our first break of the podcast. But you can see that while there are elements of romance in this novel and in this series, it does definitely touch on some deeper subjects. And as we move into the podcast further, there are other subjects that are touched on in terms of military life and PTSD, etc. So these books are definitely drawing attention to some things that are important in the author's life. So we're going to talk more with Donalyn Maurer after the break, but we do have to take that first break of the podcast. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and we will be right back.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I'm speaking today with author Donalyn Maurer about her McGinty's of San Antonio series. We just spoke about the first book in that series, Falling into Blue, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other books in the series now. Yeah, so the first two books are mainly about JC and Max. They're with a lot of, I mean, the family's big, so there's a lot of characters in there. And then from there, it moves on into some of the other characters that are in the book. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to write from the different perspectives of different family members and characters for the other books?
Well, I have to admit, it's not really something I planned on doing. It's just kind of like when you're writing and the story starts taking shape and form, it goes where it wants to go. And I tell my husband this all the time, and I know I sound crazy. I think other writers would understand. I go where the voices tell me to go. It's not something that I plan. It's just that's who's telling me who wants what and when they want it. And, Jake is the oldest and Chase is, the third or fourth oldest, and they haven't had their own book, so it just kind of goes where they want me to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not the only author that has said that. I think this is the only time in life it's acceptable for the voices to tell you where to go.
Yeah.
So there are, there are 6 books in this series. Did you set out to write a series, or did you just want to write a standalone book initially?
A standalone. Not at all did I, and I tell my husband all the time, I will never write another series because, you're trying to keep up with timelines and things like that, and it's very trying at times. But when I finished, when I got down to closing the first book, I was like, there's just so much more to this family, to these people, and I needed to keep going with it.
Mm-hmm. And there are currently 6 in the series. Is the series complete, or will you keep going with the series? Because there are more family members who have not had their own book.
Right. There's going to be more. I'm hoping to release 2 this year, and a standalone. I'm working on a standalone, and then 2 more in the series. And when you met Callie, Callie's already talking to me, and she wants her own book.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, exactly. So we may be going for quite a while. I don't want to wear the McGinty's out. I'm not going to hit every single person, but I hope to give the readers closure. Each book they'll be able to find out a little bit more what happened with this one and this one, and they're not left wondering. But I just go where the voices tell me. I'm going to be doing, coming up is a Nash and Riley, which you'll meet them, and Johnny and Macy, which you'll meet them and read along. So, yeah, they're coming up this year.
Okay. Stories. And do you have release dates for those yet, or is that still up in the air?
It's still up in the air. I was hoping to release this next one coming in March, but it's just not going to happen. It's just been a busy time for our family, and so I'm working on it, and I'm hoping to get it out, but it won't be till probably mid, right in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. As I was reading them, I know you have you said 3 children and 3 grandchildren, so you have grown children.
Yes.
And the books are romances, and they are rather steamy in places. So I'm curious if your children have read them and if they are mortified by their mother writing that kind of stuff.
They are. They have read some, and, I have I have 2 daughters, Reagan and Julia. And Julia will be 23 here soon, and Reagan's 26. And then I have my oldest son, Patrick, he'll be 32, I think, coming up. And, they were like, yeah, do it, Mom, do it, And then I think my son, he was stationed in Korea at the time, and I had sent him Falling into Blue. And he called, or he wrote me a message, and he was like, oh, at the very beginning of the book, it's very emotional. He's like, oh, my God, Mom, this book is just tearing me, different words, but, it's making me cry. And I was like, okay. And then he got a little further, and he was like, I'm done. I am so done. I said, okay, I understand. And my daughters are kind of the same way. They're kind of like, I believe it's a good story, Mom, but we're just going to leave it at that.
Right.
It's okay. But my dad has read them all, and so has my father-in-law.
Oh, wow. And
yeah, talk about awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, every generation wants to believe their parents, just enough to procreate. Yeah. You've got 3 kids.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Oh, I had one author who said her mother was fine with the books and the scenes, but that her aunt put her on the prayer chain.
I think if my grandmother and mother would still be living today, it would be different. My dad and father-in-law are much more easygoing. And my stepmom's read some too, but, being that she recalls, she's the Violet, the character Violet's based on her. And pretty much the emotion that Violet experiences in the book is what my stepmom, Judy, experienced in real life. So for some of my family that started reading it, to relive some of the things was very, very difficult. And they just kind of bowed out. They're like, I want to read it, but I just can't get past certain parts. And I'm like, I understand. Mm-hmm. I understand,
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So how is that writing for you? I mean, I don't want to get too deep into your personal business, but was it cathartic, or was it difficult to write some of the scenes that were very personal?
It was both. Letting it go, getting it out there, releasing it, letting the world know that I'm a survivor, not a victim, but a survivor. We all have our own stories. As you see, as the characters evolve, you see there's a lot of victims and there's a lot of survivors. But it also, going back into those memories to write them, left me, with nightmares, and I would wake up and kind of have, I suffer from PTSD from the things that happened. And so I would wake up and kind of like in a sweat and stuff and going, so it brought memories back, but at the same time, I kind of let them go too. But it was worth it because I wanted to let people know, women, anybody, children, women, men, if you're being something's going on in your life and you need help, please reach out,
Yeah, and because the JC does come from a very close-knit, very large family, and yet she allows kind of guilt, feeling like she's failed them. A lot of different things go into her decision to not reach out right away. So I think
that was the hardest part for my family, was them dealing with the fact that, I was trying to protect them,
mm-hmm.
And not, feeling guilty that I brought this to the family and stuff like that. So I didn't say much, But in the end, they were all fantastic, and it worked out.
Right. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. You said your husband encouraged you to start writing as a way to, save the bank account.
Yes, exactly.
Did you always want to write, though, or was that a dream of yours, or was it just something that you started to do?
Oh, no. Let me tell you, I hate English. I don't know anything about English. Bless my editors' hearts. I'm so sorry that I do this to them, but I do. That was not something I was interested in at all. But my daughter Reagan, like I said, who's now 26, she came to me when the Twilight series came out, and she was like, she wanted to read it, but she wanted me to read it, and I fought her for a long time. Going, I don't want to read it, Reagan. I just not interested. Please read it so we can have something to talk about, so we can talk about it together. And so finally I read it, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And then I started reading Nora Roberts novels, and hooked. I think I've read everything by her. Then I found Kristen Ashley. Kristen Ashley, she's like the queen of all indie authors. And she's just amazing, and she inspires all of us. Nicole James, so I just started reading more and more and more, and E.L. James with 50 Shades of Grey came out. That took off. So, yeah, that was not something I was interested in at all.
And one more interruption so we can take our second and final break of the podcast. But I love that question of, is writing something that you always wanted to do? Because it seems like there's two different sides to that story. There's two different answers to that story. It's often, yes, I wanted to be a writer since I was 4, 5, 6, whatever, or no, I stumbled on it sort of accidentally. It doesn't ever really seem to be much in the middle. So I love hearing people's stories about how they came to write their books and how they came to be writers. But we do have to take that second break of the podcast. When we come back, we will be talking more about these books, and we'll be concluding the interview with Donalyn Maurer and about her books, the McGinty's of San Antonio series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and we will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Donalyn Maurer. Because it wasn't, something that you had wanted to do since early childhood or whatever, what would your advice for other aspiring authors be?
Oh, keep going. Just keep writing. And, I think I worked at the Fort Belvoir BX in Virginia, and we had this big mall area, and visiting authors would come out and, be selling their books. And everybody kind of knew I had started writing this book, and so I said, I want to go ask some questions. So James, one of the authors, he told me, get your beginning and get your end, which they'll both change, but then you'll find your middle. And so I kind of worked off of that, and every time they were out there, they just kept saying, don't give up. It's going to come to you. Keep writing. Just keep writing. Don't stop. Don't get discouraged. If a plot isn't working, just turn around. Don't make it. Don't force it. Go try another plot.
Okay, thank you for that. You talked a little bit about some of your favorite authors. Would you say romance is your favorite genre, or do you read other genres?
Romance is pretty well. I like suspense with romance. I can't really do all kisses and hugs and all that. I mean, I got to have something else going on. I tried Dean Koontz in the past, and I was terrified reading his books. Okay. So I got scared, and I was like, they really, So I just kind of stick with romance, but they always have to have a little bit of something else going on, thriller, suspense, something going on.
Right.
So.
Do you have other authors that you didn't mention earlier that you love to read?
We have, Kay Langston, Casey Lynn, the River Savage. There's Tia Louise. I mean, there's just so many if I could name every indie author there is out there and tell people to go reach out to indie authors and read them, because Jordan Marie, Joanna Wild. There are so many amazing indie authors out there that people, they kind of stick to publish, like Nora Roberts or stuff like that. But gosh, take a chance on an indie author, and you'll be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Where can people find you on social or on the internet? Do you have a website?
Yes, I have under Donalyn Maurer. I have Instagram, I have Twitter, I have Facebook, I have Amazon. You can follow me on all of those. Goodreads, I'm on all of those.
Okay. And the books are available on Amazon. Are they available other places as well to order or to buy?
Yeah, Barnes and Nobles, for the paperbacks. And I think I saw them at Walmart and a few other places too for the paperback.
Oh, okay.
The ebooks are strictly Amazon.
Okay. Thank you. This isn't a question that I normally ask, but the books take place in San Antonio. You grew up in that area. You clearly love the area. What is your favorite thing? I mean, Texans, I mentioned before we started recording that I lived in Texas for a few years, and Texans are very, very proud of Texas. What is your favorite thing about the San Antonio area?
Not the heat, but I was. That's the one thing I could do without. I think one of the things that I really like doing is exploring the historical area, like the Missions and the Alamo, the River Walk. All of that area down there is very, very historical and tells a story. We had some friends recently move here, Paul and Kelly, and one of the things I've been trying to get them to do is go down. Let's go see the missions, because you just take a tour through all these missions, and there's chapels, and they're beautiful and stuff like that. And so, like you said, we got to go down there and we got to see these things, because there was Indians there. So that's probably the historical part that really just takes a hold of my heart and makes me want to look around more.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like people to know about your books or your writing, or anything that we just haven't covered?
Okay, yeah. My fourth book, His Forgotten Love, I wrote for my son Patrick. He's a sergeant in the Army, Cav Scout, and he's been, PTSD with soldiers is very real, and he lost quite a few friends that meant a lot to him. And in that book, I took a turn and I went and hit that subject. And in the books, I reach out to people and kind of implore them, if you see somebody suffering from abuse or PTSD or anything, don't remain silent. Reach out to them. I've added numbers to all my books for different organizations that they can contact if they need help, wounded warriors, or, just anything. If you see somebody, I just implore people, do not remain silent. Reach out. Keep reaching out. Call the police. Keep calling them. You hear screaming, you call. You call until something happens,
Yeah.
So if that's the one thing I could get across is, for us to love each other and take care of each other.
Okay. Yeah, and that was something that I did appreciate about the books, is that you do give those numbers, and especially at the beginning of the fourth book, you have a little bit of a author's note that says, that says pretty much a lot of what you just said, and these are some places that you can look to for information, Wounded Warrior, etc. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. Well, I want to thank you also for taking the time out to be on the podcast. I really appreciated having you, and for writing these books.
Thank you so much.
And once again, I do want to thank my guest, author Donalyn Maurer, for taking the time to talk about her writing and her series, The McGinty's of San Antonio. You can find her books on Amazon, as she said, and paperbacks at places like Barnes and Noble. All of those social media sites that she mentioned, you will be able to find on the blog post that will accompany this episode. And as a reminder, the website for the blog is www.gsmcbookreview.blogspot.com, and that address is in the episode notes for this episode, the description of this show. So you can find that, and then you can go to the blog and you can find all of Donalyn's information for where to find her on social media. Again, thank you to Donalyn for joining me today. Thank you to my listeners for joining me every week. I love spending this time with you, even though I don't get to see you. And I was just thinking it's a really good idea. It's a really good thing that you can't see me, because I talk with my hands like a crazy person. I am alone in the studio just waving my hands around. So thank you for joining me and listening to me, but not having to see me. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you will join me again for the next episode. But in the meantime, you can find all of our podcasts, not just this one. We have a whole family of podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can download those podcasts, all the normal places like iTunes and SoundCloud, any place that you listen to podcasts, especially for your mobile devices, where you can find us pretty much anywhere. You can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram, plus the blog. So there's just all kinds of places that you can come and interact or learn more about the authors and the books that I talk about, and lots of other good stuff. So thank you so much for joining me. Please join me again next time. But in the meantime, go out there and get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.